All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Friday. It's the free-for-all. Hope you're well and looking forward to the weekend. I certainly am. And the holiday season coming up as well. I do want to let folks know, if you want to give me a present, I know a lot of people are saying, how can I help you out, Hal? I know you love something special for the holidays. So I do have an idea. I have, in fact, it's not even an idea. I know what I want. I want you to subscribe to Halitics. If you haven't yet done so on YouTube, please do so. And if you have subscribed, then the next thing I want you to do is just click like. Just click like. And the third thing you could do is share. Share this with your friends, family, anybody you think might like what I do here, Halitics. And if you want to give me something even more special, besides, well, you could comment, but I'd love, feedback, constructive feedback. The channel, I think I do a good job. I know the people who watch, you guys love it, but we haven't blown up the way I'd like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time whining about this, but that's my hope, my goal. We really can make a difference at this group that I'm trying to build, and we build a group. It's just a small group. The group on Facebook at Halitics and online at Halitics. I want us to be making a real difference, working together to make the world just a little bit better, getting to a place where we can at least debate, how do we make a society, how do we remake our society into a place where everyone has enough and no one has too much. That is the goal for sure. That's what I'm trying to do here. And so if you have constructive feedback, suggestions, advice, help in getting there, that would be just great. All right, Friday the 20th. So next week, just so folks know, I'll be off the 25th, I'll be off the 27th, and I'll be off the following week. And then we'll hit the ground running in 2025. A little bit of cheery note there, certainly in terms of my, affect, my voice, but it gets dark quickly, sadly, on Halitics. I'm sure that's a big, in terms of why we have a loyal but small following. I'm sure that's part of it. People want something a little more cheery, a little more upbeat, and I try to provide it when I can. Our program normally does begin now with the U.S.-backed genocide in Gaza, perpetrated by the Israeli military with the full support, the unwavering support of the U.S. government. And yesterday was a particularly bad day. I walk around my neighborhood with my wife. That's sort of my exercise. My main form of exercise is walking in my neighborhood. And it's nice, right? I mean, it's a nice middle-class neighborhood, I think is fair to say. And it's quiet. It's peaceful. It's safe. Every house, when I walk by it, it's standing. There's a lawn. I mean, not everything's perfectly mowed. It's certainly not mine. There's leaves and there's whatever, weeds. But it's pleasant. You can enjoy life. You can feel good. You don't worry. Think about what that kind of life would be to a Palestinian, to a Gazan. It's completely divorced from their reality. A reality that's rubble, that's constantly scrambling away from drones, from bombs, picking your way through an abandoned city, scrambling for some food scraps. That's what the U.S. government, that's what the Harris-Biden administration, that's what the Netanyahu government has done to Israel. Think about that. When it's Christmas, think about that. 77 more Palestinians killed over the past 24 hours. An Israeli strike on 2 schools turned shelters killed 15 displaced Palestinians in Gaza City. Are there any not or placed? Are there any Palestinians who are placed, or are they all displaced? It would appear they're all displaced. I haven't seen. There's nothing standing. Israeli forces continue their brutal siege on North Gaza with attacks reported in Beit Hanun, and Israeli quadcopters seen shooting civilians. We know all of these horror stories are very, very likely to be true. They are not exaggerated. There are multiple sources that confirm that Israel's doing the worst things any group of people, any people could do to any other. This is all still under the Harris-Biden administration. And so when I hear, I just get so frustrated, so angry at the insistence by Democrats that they somehow enjoy moral superiority over Republicans when virtually all, not all, Democrats voted for the genocider, Kamala Harris. That's where we are right now, folks. If you have some better way, solution, I want to know what it is. Please, 240-242-5646. I urged you. I said, please vote for Jill Stein. I called on my former progressive organizers. We got to move away from these Democrats. They're awful. They're so bad. And you know what the response was? Well, you know what, Hal? They're not fascists. Trump's a fascist. Trump's a tyrant. We got to unite to defeat the greater enemy first. There's got to be a Trump first. It's kind of like Germany first, Hitler first, then we worry about Tojo. That's the response. And it's so wholly inadequate to this moment. 45,200 plus Gazans killed by Israel. 77 more victims yesterday. It's completely divorced from reality to say, well, the problem is Trump. That's the issue. Trump is not the one who gave Israel, has continually given Israel the green light to kill Palestinians. It just isn't Trump. No matter how much you want to believe that, no matter how much you want to say, well, he moved the embassy, right? He moved the embassy, so therefore it's his fault. Biden didn't move it back. It was bad what Trump did. No one's defending Trump. But to just simply try to pin all of this on Trump is so absurd. And we see it over and over again. Here's Thom Hartmann. I want to play this clip for you because it kind of tells you where the progressive media is. It's very, very short, just really, really short. But I know a lot of you really like Tom and you trust Tom and you think Tom gets it. So here's Hartmann explaining just how serious, how desperate our straits are right now. Let's go.
How Trump transforms democracy to dictatorship, a warning America can't afford to ignore. It's over in his post under the Daily Take tab there.
All right, so let me play that again because you probably didn't hear it and it was very brief. But this is from yesterday's Thom Hartmann program. The thumbnail is his, Trump's plan to crush opposition.
How Trump transforms democracy to dictatorship, a warning America can't afford to ignore. It's over in his post under the Daily Take tab there.
All right, so he posts on the Daily Take track yesterday. He announces his warning that Trump is going to transform democracy, like we have a democracy now, into dictatorship. So I wanted to know what that was because, what is he talking about? So I went over to the Daily Take. I don't follow Thom Hartmann. I know some of you do. He's not been on my list for a long time of go-to progressives, although some of his work is really good. And I'm not dismissing him completely, but he just doesn't really do it for me anyway. So here's his Daily Take. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. So where's this Daily Take, Tom? I'm sorry, I'm moving around a little bit trying to get myself in a better spot. Okay, so the reason I think that Daily Take, now maybe that was yesterday's Daily Take and there's going to be a new one today. That's what I'm sort of suspecting. But it's also important to realize that yesterday's Daily Take by Tom Hartman was all about how Trump is, and Elon Musk, I keep hearing this, Elon Musk and Donald Trump are dictating everything in the House of Representatives, and they're the puppet masters, and they have complete control. This is fascism. This is the end of all of our freedoms, our democracy, as though really we had a democracy, as though we weren't being spied on under orders of Barack Obama, as though there aren't secret courts, as though there aren't death panels, as though there aren't corporations that are prosecuting American citizens, as though all of that isn't happening. Somehow now Trump is going to take away our freedoms, and it's all coming to a head right now in the House of Representatives, where Musk and Trump are pulling the strings and dictating exactly what goes on. What's funny about that is that it didn't prove to be the case, right? The House rebelled against Trump. And it wasn't a fabled union of the responsible centrist right and the center left, you know, the Cheneys, right? The Liz Cheneys of the world, although she's not in power, but the people like her teaming up with Democrats like Josh Gottheimer to save democracy. The center will hold. Not at all. It was actually the Republican right that said no to Trump. But here's Lawrence O'Donnell gloating Musk-Trump defeat. And I find this so funny that he's gloating about, because all we've heard from his network, and presumably from him, I never watch MSNBC, so I can't say this. But presumably, O'Donnell too, all they've done is tell us how Trump, you know, you can't indulge yourself and not vote for Kamala. You can't say, oh, she's the lesser of evils, I'm not going to vote for evil, because otherwise we're going to get Hitler. Because otherwise we'll have full-blown fascism, authoritarianism. And yet, now, when it's clear we don't have that, as the party of Trump says no to Trump, O'Donnell pivots on a dime. It's like he doesn't even recognize the irony that he who fearmongered, and his network that fearmongered, Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and all of them telling us that if you elect Trump, you're electing Hitler. And now when his own party says no to him, O'Donnell can't contain his glee.
Well, you are now watching live coverage of the total collapse of the Elon Musk-Donald Trump partnership in governing in the House of Representatives tonight.
That's so weird. The total collapse. Wow. That was an awful short reign for King Trump. It was an awful short reign for tyrant Trump. It was an awful short reign for dictator Trump. It just collapsed. Wow.
You are now watching live coverage of the total collapse of the Elon Musk-Donald Trump partnership in governing in the House of Representatives tonight.
All right, I guess he's not so all-powerful. I guess he doesn't quite have as much power and control over everyone, at least in his party. And what's, again, the folks who showed independence, now trust me, the last thing I'm is a ultra-righty. But what we have seen from the Freedom Caucus, from the most conservative members of the Republican Party, is a welcome independence from their leaders, a willingness to vote against them, a willingness to send them to defeat, as they deposed John Boehner, and then later on the Virginian that took his place, I forget his name, Eric something or other, and ultimately they got rid of they replaced whoever was there with Mike Johnson because of the vote in favor of Ukraine funding. So what you're seeing is, at least on the Republican side, some democracy, some willingness to say, no, we're not going to support our leadership come hell or come high water. But you don't see that. You don't see that in the Democratic Party. The Democratic leaders like AOC, they all fell in line. Oh, yeah, we're voting for Hakeem Jeffries. I'll never forget Jamie Raskin bragging about how the Democrats don't argue and fight over who their leader is, that they just coalesce. They just unite. Well, they united behind the congressman from Wall Street, the congressman from AIPAC, Hakeem Jeffries to be their leader. You know who they didn't unite behind? AOC. She was clearly the correct choice if you go by the normal procedures in the House. She was number 2 in the House Oversight Committee. She had been chosen to be number 2 by Jamie Raskin, former number 1, moved on to Judiciary Committee. I don't like Raskin either, by the way, but okay, he was sort of a progressive, I guess, and she's maybe sort of more of a progressive than he was, but she was number 2. She raises 10 times as much money as Jerry Connolly, who's also got cancer, inoperable cancer, will probably die soon, and yet former Speaker Pelosi said, no, we're not going to have AOC. We're going to have Connolly. By the way, you want to talk about a puppet master? You want to talk about somebody who pulls the strings? I think you might want to look at Pelosi as much as you look at Donald Trump in terms of wielding true power, control. 240-242-5646. Love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe. Please click subscribe. That would be, what a great gift that would be for me if I see more. I was happy yesterday. I got one more subscription. Just one more. Makes hell a happy man. From the New York Times, this was 25 minutes ago. Transition Live update. Shutdown looms as GOP rebels against Trump. Wow. Not amazing. This is this all-powerful Pharaoh that we've been told over and over. You gotta vote for him, against him. You can't vote for him. You gotta vote against him, because if he wins, say goodbye to checks and balances. Say goodbye to any kind of divided government. Well, again, when Trump tries to do something that goes against the core principles of the Republican right, that group is going to vote against him. And they did. They rejected his Trump-backed proposal to suspend the debt ceiling for 2 years because it didn't include guaranteed cuts in spending. Now, I think what we really need is higher taxes. But the focus that the Republican right has on keeping the budget at least sort of balanced, I don't totally disagree with that. I know many progressives say, oh, it doesn't matter. The government can always print more money. Yeah, it can. And what happens when it does is you get inflation. And that does hurt people on fixed incomes. That does hurt workers who don't get the raises they should get, because we live in an oligopoly, where we have an oligopolistic economy where corporations exert extraordinary power over wages. They determine wages rather than there be a negotiation between workers and employers. The employer sets the wage, and that's it. Workers either take it or leave it. We have wage. Really, what we have is wage. We have employee surplus. We have worker surplus. And I understand people say, well, employment is low, so how do we have worker surplus? Because workers aren't making enough in their job, so they take 2 jobs, 3 jobs. If something is offered, there's going to be demand for that job. And, that means that the corporations can keep wages low. Meanwhile, they also exert upward pressure on prices. So when you have deficit spending, which is what Trump is calling for, what Biden called for, you do get inflation. And I don't care what MMT people say, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Call in if you don't like that, 240-242-5646. Anyway, the Republican right said, yeah, we don't want unfettered spending by the president, even one we voted for, even one that we strongly supported. Right-wing lawmakers. Don't you wish, as a progressive, as a Democrat, if you're watching this program, you had legislators on your team who actually had the courage of their convictions, who would vote against bills that violated your core principles? I sure do. But right-wing lawmakers, to their credit, we don't care. We supported you, Trump. We like you, Trump. We know that our voters like you, but we're not going to vote to give you carte blanche to spend without any fetters. And I think that's good. I really do. And I think that demonstrates that the fear mongering that Trump would be a dictator in the mold of a Mussolini or a Stalin or a Hitler was, at least at this point, we can say to this point, overblown, because the Republican right wing has said no. That's a good thing. Now, will that change? It could change. Am I afraid? Yes, I am a bit afraid. I think Trump is, he's a wild card, and you don't know what he's going to want to do and what he's going to try to do. But at least to this point, his own party has stood up to him. I have made the argument that to those who claim, Trump's a fascist, Democrats aren't. The basic claim that they make to distinguish between Republicans or Trump and Democrats is, well, Trump wants to stay in power forever, whereas we've seen up until Trump, even with someone like George W. Bush, they leave office when their second term is up. They go gently into that good night, or maybe not so gently. And I don't reject that completely. That is, right, a charismatic leader who is not subject to the vagaries of the populace and being voted out is certainly a hallmark of fascism. But I think you have to look a little beyond that if you really want to get to the core of the lack of freedoms that we now enjoy, at least the freedom from one. And the freedom to have an effective voice over government, which are largely lost for just about everyone. And what the Democratic Party and the Republican Party has really done is made voting almost irrelevant. So this is from, I think it's called the Duluth Reader, which I actually shared at Halitics on Facebook, which you should join, you should participate in if you haven't yet. And Harlan picked it up, which I really appreciated. I know he liked this. This is from an article he posted that I posted also. Fascism is a dictatorship, authoritarian rule from the extreme right. But what Mussolini, or at least the writer of this piece, they sort of took from Mussolini's writings and his backers. It's really the centralization of power in the hands of a corporate elite. Few men with who are industrialists and financial lords. And so you would say, and the writer here says, I want to ask for latitude to insist that we might have fascism, even though we maintain a pretense of democratic machinery. So we have a court system, we have a House of Representatives, a Senate, and a President, but they're not sufficient protection against the utter centralization of power in the hands of a few men. And I think that's really where we are right now. And many would have said, well, those few men include like Elon Musk, who is probably the second richest man in the world, because I think Tesla stock is way down. But yeah, he wields extraordinary power, as of course does Bezos and other billionaire elites. They are the ones who make the decisions, the Rupert Murdochs of the world. They control. They're in control. They're large and in charge. And so that's why I think the Democratic Party also is wholly complicit and could be considered a fascist party. because we had no say over their policies. Even though it was clear that unwavering support for Israel was not popular, Kamala tripled down on it. Even though it was clear that Joe Biden was not competent anymore mentally to be president, we had no real say over who would run as a Democrat. Kamala was anointed by the party elites. There was no meaningful primary. Now, I would argue that fascistic hold, that corporate hold over the Democratic Party, was tenuous, at least until 2020. There was a real opportunity that Democratic voters squandered in 2016 and 2020. Democratic primary voters squandered to vote for Bernie, who would have been a welcome, vastly improved change from the Democrats that were, from every other Democrat running, and also from Trump in both 2016 and 2020. So that stranglehold by the corporate elites was not completed until after the 2020 election. And I reject those who argue, well, Bernie was probably going to win, but, this unholy alliance of Clyburn, Obama, and the rest of the Democratic candidates who all pulled out, except for Elizabeth Warren, because her continued presence in the race actually hurt Bernie. So I think that's the argument, right? That the elites in the Democratic Party, with full support from their corporate donors, said, let's figure out how we can torpedo Bernie. And they did. But all that said, you still could have elected Bernie. You still could have voted for Bernie. Democratic primary voters still had a true progressive option in 2020, and they forsake it. They gave it up. They said, we don't want it. We're not going to take it. We'll go along. We'll get in line. So at this point, the Democratic Party now has become full fascist. Even if, yes, there isn't clearly a desire for one charismatic leader to remain in power beyond the legal limit. The intermarriage, the interlocking, unholy alliance between corporate and government, corporations and government, between billionaire class and government, can kind of be gleaned, I think, seen in some of Joe Biden's pardons, right? So let's start with this. This is from the Due Distance Bros. I decided to just use their video. It's a little quicker for me, but they deserve some credit. They showed this to me. I learned about this through them, and I think their take is somewhat interesting. So here we go. Worst pardon yet? ?
Former Pennsylvania judge Michael Conahan was convicted in 2011 in what was infamously called the Kids for Cash scandal, where he took kickbacks from for-profit detention centers in exchange for wrongly sending juveniles to their facilities. The case was widely considered to be one of the worst judicial scandals in Pennsylvania history.
But I'm going to stop it there for a second. So this is a perfect example, by the way, of localized fascism, right? A corporation, a for-profit company, pays off a judge to send kids to him as, to sentence kids to their facilities so they'll make more money. It's government wholly corrupted by corporate cash, by greed. And in the worst possible way, you're sending children to these horrific institutions where they're being exploited, where their labor is being taken from them, where they're not getting to be children, they're not getting to learn. It's pure fascism, right, on a local level. A powerful individual is tying his interests directly to a for-profit corporation and therefore directly betraying his job, his duties to the people of his community. And Joe Biden pardoned him. Now, Biden has sort of an excuse. It probably is the worst pardon, but let me play a little more of this, though. But it's fascism. It's pure fascism.
Like all of the other nearly 1,500 people who got commutations from Biden this week, Conahan was freed from prison due to COVID. His house arrest was set to end in 2026.
All right, so this isn't just a situation where somebody's already free, they're already out, they're 89 years old. It's like their spouse's last wishes, give them. I still don't think he should get a pardon no matter what, but this is meaningful. This guy was under house arrest and would have been all next year, and now he's freed from that. It's horrible. Now, he has an excuse, does Biden. So let me play that for you, because they to their credit, the due distance guys give you the explanation for this.
A Biden administration official told CNN the latest commutations were not individual decisions, and instead it was a uniform decision granted to people who met certain criteria, like having a track record of good behavior while on house.
All right, so he's a judge, right? I mean, this is an upper crusty type elite prisoner, so presumably he's under house arrest. His behavior's been good, right? You got to look a little bit more carefully into this. Presumably he's nonviolent. I don't know if that was a criteria or not, that he would be categorized as nonviolent, but his crime is incredibly violent. The violence he did to children. He falsely arrested them, incarcerated them. He wrongly incarcerated children. How is that not violent? By the way, hey, Ari, good to see you in the chat. So appreciate that very, very much. And I like the Palestine flags too. All in on Palestine for sure. Let's just hope that there is some justice and there is some karma, as you indicate. Yeah, it's fascism. This is government fascism. Pardoning. Well, first of all, having a judge who sentences kids to some kind of work farm. Shades of I'm a prisoner from a chain gang 90 plus years later. But that's his part. Now let's go to a guy who really should be pardoned. And again, I've talked about Stephen Doniger before. This is a lawyer who went after Chevron and got an enormous judgment in Ecuador because Chevron was dumping toxic sludge into the Amazon. And Chevron didn't like it and fought back, and ultimately, rather than Chevron being censured or Chevron paying fees or Chevron paying a penalty or suffering in any way, really, except for their probably enormous legal bills, this guy was actually put under house arrest. And I'm not sure if he was actually incarcerated, but he has been, until recently, he spent about 500 days, I believe, under house arrest. He wants a pardon. Let's play from Doniger.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I want to say at the outset, there are a lot of people worthy of pardons who've been in prison a really long time. And just because I'm seeking a pardon and advocating for one doesn't mean those other people should not get pardoned. So I want to urge the president to take a really broad view of what he should do now with his pardon power. He's pardoned 39 people last week after, of course, pardoning his son, Hunter. The people he pardoned last week.
So that's interesting that he raises the Hunter Biden pardon. And, Arlen and I discussed it. It's not I get that. That didn't really trouble me particularly. But again, if you're going to use your pardon power to pardon somebody who is corrupt, who used very, very, powerful family connections, i.e. Hunter Biden, you're pardoning him. What about a guy who goes after power, doesn't use power first to self-aggrandize for their own, benefit, but somebody who actually goes after power to help the victims, the cancer victims in the Amazon basin from Chevron's criminal behavior. How about trying to help him out?
Were really safe cases. No one was in prison. People had been out of prison for, many of them been out of prison for decades. So that's 39 people. He has 12,000 applications. I'm one of them. My case is different because I am the only person in U.S. history ever prosecuted privately by a corporation, in this case.
I want to stop it there. He is the first person, only person he claims, and may be true, I don't know, prosecuted by a private corporation. He wasn't even prosecuted by the U.S. government or by a local or state government. We actually let a corporation, which had an incredible conflict of interest, finance his prosecution. That's fascism.
On the oil company, which had a judge charge me with contempt of court for refusing to give my confidential case file to Chevron lawyers. And when I appealed that, the judge charged me with criminal contempt of court, and the prosecution was rejected by the Department of Justice, at which point the judge appointed a private law firm, a corporate law firm, with Chevron as a client to step into the shoes of the U.S. government and prosecute me directly. And it was.
All right, so there it is. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more blatant, more obvious case of if you don't want to call it pure fascism, again, proto-fascism. Two perfect examples. One, a corrupt judge, hand in glove with a for-profit corporation that uses child labor. And the judge sentences, furnishes them with, the judge procures children to work for this corporation. That's government and corporations in an unholy alliance. Biden pardons the judge. You have another example of perfect marriage of corporation and government. A Chevron-financed law firm prosecutes criminally a man who sued Chevron. So clearly, unquestionably, and by the way, it's incredibly hard to even get the progressive Democratic caucus to sign off on a letter to Merrick Garland urging the Justice Department rather, to investigate that for any violations, right? To investigate that federal judge who appointed the law firm to prosecute Doniger. And some members of the Progressive Caucus signed a letter to Garland. Many others did not. It was incredibly difficult even getting Jamie Raskin on board. Supposedly, your hero, right? Raskin, right? It clearly, this is what we're talking about. A government run by a small group of large industrialists and financial lords. Trump is not the cancer. He is a symptom of that cancer. And if you focus all your ire, all your anger, all your blame on him, you're completely missing the story. It's like, again, using the cancer analogy, a cancer-ridden patient with tumors all over their body, and we're going to try to excise one of them in an extremity. As though if we remove one lump from their arm, then the tumors in their chest and their legs and their neck are all going to just go away. It doesn't work that way. We need a completely different government. We need a different structure. We need to get rid of the Republicrats, period. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. It's a Friday. It's a free-for-all. That means you're supposed to call in. More. And again, free-for-all, kind of revisit. So just continuing on the Democrats are fascists, just like Republicans story. This I posted in Facebook, and it kind of exemplifies, I think, the reactions I got. I'm going to show you one, but there were a number where people got very, very angry at me for posting this. Aren't we already fascist? Biden cabinet picks worked alongside influential lobbyists at private equity firms. So on the left, you have General, I can't even now, I forget. He's the defense secretary. I'll get to it in just a moment. On the right, Antony Blinken. So two of the most powerful figures on the planet, two of the most influential people who have extraordinary, sway over our politics, our policies, and also over people's lives. And guess what? Just before they went into the Biden administration, at the very top, they were working for defense contractors. They were working for people who have get money from us, our tax money. Yeah, Lloyd Austin. Sorry, folks. For some reason, General Austin's name often escapes me. I don't know why I have trouble with that. I shouldn't, but I do. Austin especially, I think, was a partner at a firm that lobbied, whereas Antony Blinken doesn't call himself a lobbyist, but basically was kind of a connector, right? He was kind of an advisor. He would connect the CEOs of big companies and their executives of those corporations that wanted to do business, that wanted big government contracts, defense, Pentagon contracts. He would connect them to people because he had all those connections built up when he was, I believe, an undersecretary under Obama. And of course, Lloyd Austin, being a general, he's going to have a ton of connections. Retired general. So that's fascism. People didn't like that. People rebelled against my take. And I was asked, some of you may recognize who I'm debating with here, but it doesn't really matter. We're complicit in genocide and on the brink of a hot war with Russia, and all people can do is complain about Trump. The Middle East is collapsing, which it most certainly is. I mean, you saw what happened in Syria, obviously. This is all weapons, and Lebanon has been completely destabilized. Gaza's is basically empty. This is a weapons manufacturer's wet dream, and Biden's Secretary of State and Defense Secretary, that would be Lloyd Austin's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, worked for weapons manufacturers. Biden and Harris are bringing on Armageddon. Trump could not be worse. So the response is, so he worked for weapons manufacturers one time? When? I've read Blinken's bio, and nowhere does he say that. Well, or does it say that? Well, I don't know who wrote that bio, but of course they're not going to tell you that if it's some kind of a, puff piece. They're going to elide that. Blinken stranded after Davos. This is this year, right? So he's at Davos. That's where the elite meet, the richest, most powerful people. After Davos by Boeing, his old client. Well, there's your weapons manufacturer. And he worked for him because it's his client. The Boeing company, the world's 5th largest weapons manufacturer. What do they make? Fighter jets, attack helicopters, which the Israeli Air Force has used extensively in all of its attacks. They also make bombs. It's not just planes and other flying machines, but bombs. Or they use these kits which are used with bombs. And I believe they also made some of the bombs too. So that's who Antony Blinken worked for. That's fascism. Endless war for the profit of a few. Death for thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions. That's fascism. So the response was not, Yeah, you got a good point, Hal. Maybe we shouldn't support Biden either. Maybe we need to move in a different direction altogether. That would be what you'd expect, right? When it's like clear, it's so obvious that the people being replaced are fascists, just as the replacements are. But instead, that's supposed to link him to arms sales? Of course it is. His client is getting massive government contracts to supply weapons that are being used to kill people. People who are totally innocent. And the response is, that's supposed to link him to arms sales? That's stretching. Don't you think? Nice try, though. What? Are you serious is my response. His former client manufactures the bombs, or the guidance system anyway, Israel's using to commit genocide. You don't think that makes him unfit to serve? It's also interesting because the goalposts were shifted. My point was simply, we're fascist. You have people who work for weapons manufacturers who are now in charge of our entire war machine. That's fascism. Oh, well, that's opposed to link him to arms sales. That's not really the point. The point is that corporations and government are working together, period. But yeah, it does link him to arms sales. And yeah, we have a caucusocracy. We have the worst people. Not only the most incompetent people, the greediest, the most sociopathic in charge. And it's terrifying. There's just nothing good to be said about any of this. I do spend a lot of time. 240-242-5646. Would love to chat with you. I don't see a lot of people. Would thought today's program might be popular, but maybe I'm wrong. Sorry to hear that. Sorry to see that. I don't know. It's weird. It's like why some get a lot of hits and others don't. I don't want to get things to be consistent. I have made the point over and over that the attacks on Trump for his tariff policies are misguided, are wrong-headed, that we need tariffs, that tariffs are important. And I will absolutely stand by that. I'm not pulling back from that view at all. But I accept the criticism that he doesn't implement the tariffs well, that he's done it ineffectually, that he's using a shotgun approach when you need a scalpel. I get all that. I don't disagree with that. Foreign affairs, I don't always agree with them. I often don't. They're pretty neocon in their, at least when it comes to military projection of force. But I thought this was actually a pretty good piece here from a couple days ago, 3 days ago. China's slowdown has changed the trade war. America now has the upper hand, but Trump's maximalist tariffs would still carry risks. So I think that secondary headline is completely wrong and isn't really consistent with the piece. But if usually you would employ tariffs, like they say maximalist tariffs, the time you would really need tariffs is when you're losing a trade war, when you're seeing far more imports than exports, when there's a major trade gap. But the point of this article is that China is no longer really in that position where they're manufacturing for our market, and they've displaced, and they already have largely to a significant degree displaced much American domestic manufacturing. But they're saying, the article is pointing out, I think accurately, that that's not really where we are right now. China isn't quite as big, doesn't pose quite the danger to our economy, and specifically to our working class, as it did. There are other dangers we need to focus on, but China isn't the biggest problem. And that's why that secondary headline doesn't make sense. Maximalist tariffs are most called for, right? Very high tariffs in a situation where we're totally losing ground. And that was when they would have the maximum benefit. Against a weakened economic adversary, there's far less risk involved with those tariffs. I mean, what's the big, there's no benefits nor risks. It says it would still carry risks. It suggests that there would be greater risks if China was eating our lunch. But if China was eating our lunch, that's when we would absolutely need them. So the headline kind of, I guess they're just anti-tariff. I'm not really clear, but even if that's the case, because that headline just didn't make sense. But even if the headline writer is anti-tariff, if you read the article, it's pretty sensible. They recognize, no, there are benefits to tariffs. Trump makes some good points, but maybe not a 60% or 50% on everything. Maybe we don't use that shotgun approach. And I think that's right. We shouldn't use the shotgun approach. A shotgun approach with tariffs is almost certainly better than no tariffs. But a better approach, the best practice, is to say, okay, where are exports? Where is our economy doing well? And what industries are we doing well? Where would we want to continue to have trade? Where do we need to reduce our trade deficit? And that seems like not what Trump has talked about. So first, the article Foreign Affairs explains what the real problem is in China, is that their people are still relatively poor. It's still a developing country for sure. And their economy, domestic economy, in other words, whatever's made for the Chinese market, cannot generate nearly enough demand to absorb everything China produces. So they have this massive production overcapacity. They can make far more than they can consume. So they have to export. But countries like the United States and others are buying less from China. Partly that's because Chinese wages have gone up a little bit. They're still far below ours, but they're above Vietnam, Haiti, and some other countries. So now, of course, manufacturers always looking for the cheapest labor possible that they can exploit are going to Vietnam and Haiti and other very poor countries. The real solution, therefore, is tariffs that aren't focused on China, that aren't limited only to China, that also look at other very low-wage nations and say, okay, we're going to impose tariffs on all goods that come in from those countries, or at least all goods except in these specific markets. For example, I think there's Haitian rum. Well, we don't make rum. We don't need a tariff on Haitian rum, right? We don't need a tariff on products that are coming from countries that have a advantage when it comes to producing them that isn't related to their cheap labor. That's not where you put tariffs. You use tariffs because in cases where countries have an advantage because they pay their workers $1 an hour. They pay their workers $2 an hour. That's the reason to have tariffs. So Foreign Affairs says what Trump should do. And I agree with this, by the way. Again, this is, I'll argue with their premises and all, but I think this is by and large correct what they're saying here. In a case where China is no longer such a potent adversary economically, we should look much more closely at whether a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports and only a 10% tariff on goods from elsewhere makes sense. Instead, we should probably look at each case individually. There should be an office. It should be the Federal Trade Commission. And, where would tariffs provide the most bang for the buck? Where would they stimulate U.S. manufacturing most and cost us the least? That's what a smart tariff strategy would look like. And one of the concerns of Foreign Affairs is applying high tariffs to our trading partners could set off a harmful chain reaction in Western economies with rising costs, cratering demand, and a slowing of supply chain diversification. So the supply chain diversification, I thought, was very, very interesting. We do have these very long and somewhat precarious supply chains, especially coming over from Asia. And if there's a war, if we have a problem with a trading partner, China especially, they decide they don't want our computers. They don't want us to have the best computers, so they're going to start mucking around with our computers because they make all our computers. That's a problem. That's worrisome. That's why we need lots of different sources for our goods, so that if any one country becomes, goes offline for whatever reason, we're not stuck. And that now there's so much specialization, whereas even with a computer, the chips are made here, and the GPUs, the graphical processing units, are made there, and the monitors are made somewhere else. That is where you have these incredibly specialized links on that supply chain. So I don't really necessarily want supply chain diversification it's better than what we have now. But what I really want is we make it all. It's all manufactured here. That's the solution. And that's what the tariff program really should be focused on. Building a vibrant, comprehensive, sustainable, and self-sufficient economy. I agree with foreign affairs to this degree. Just slapping enormous tariffs on China without recognizing the problems that other trading partners, especially those in the global south that have very low wages, impose on us is hardly a solution at all. It's not going to make things better. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Got a couple more minutes left, and then I'm going to take off for the weekend, just looking at my slides here and trying to figure out what story would be really interesting to kind of close with. Maybe, I don't know, I did talk about The Nation and Jacobin and how much they disappointed me with their refusal to, even really consider the Green Party option. That they deserved us. They failed. And that's really, we don't have, we're alone. You're on your own here. You really are. We don't have a vibrant, independent left. The media, the institutional left, and I talked about this during the week, and I'm just one more time, they are captured by, and beholden to the Democratic Party. And until we can break that, until we can rip that stranglehold apart, we're done. We cannot bring about the change. We cannot end the fascism. Because the Republican Party is the fascism. Their ties, unbreakable ties, to the billionaire class and corporate elites. I really did appreciate, and just real quick, if you haven't seen it, I just want to go back and just urge on you again to watch yesterday's program with Chuck Pinocchio, because Chuck really gets it. He said, one of his biggest concerns, and I was delighted to hear this after he'd been on with the Progressive Democrats, PDA, was to say, hey, they're not prepared. They can't seem to work with Republicans. They're not willing to reach out. They won't reach across the aisle. And that's just not going to solve our problems. So I hope in the new year, and I'll be back before this isn't my last program for this year. Of course, I'll be on next week too, part of it. But really what I'm going to continue to focus on, it's not like it's going to be a new thing. What I'm going to continue to focus on is trying to build a working alliance with working people, poor people, struggling people, that is independent completely of the Democrat Party, may vote for some Democrats, may support some Democrats, when they themselves demonstrate true independence from their party and the corporate elites. That's what we need. That's the only hope I have. And I'll be back on Monday.